I'll hit record. Okay, so we always start the same way. Where do you guys like to eat in Fresno?
Man,
Where do we
so
not like to eat?
that's the question.
That's the
Yeah.
question.
So my favorite place to eat, and this is recent, is a 559 taco.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, they have like this huge quesadilla pizza. That thing is absolutely incredible. Like it's my favorite thing ever. So I've ordered it like 4 times already. So they basically have like my cell phone bill at the restaurant.
Man, Fresno Bagel. I haven't had it since the pandemic hit, so I don't even know if they're still open. I hope they survived because they're just amazing. Kebab City makes really good.
So you're saying all the staples right now.
Oh,
man.
Let's talk about Fresno Bagel for a second, and we'll get back to those queso tacos in a second at 559. So at Fresno Bagel, I didn't realize that they also have like curry and stuff. Have you
Yeah,
ever had non-bagel related items there?
I've had the potatoes. They're really delicious. I haven't had all the other like the Thai food stuff that they make. I think people that own their Thai.
wow.
But yeah, the all-in-one. I mean, you can't go wrong.
It's true. And it's a funny thing about places like that. When I lived in San Francisco, around the corner from my house, there was this Vietnamese restaurant that did breakfast, and they named the restaurant the Mayflower. So you could order like a banh mi sandwich or an omelet, and we were just trying to understand, like, what is this place? What do you? And they're just like, if you'll buy it, we'll sell it to you. It doesn't matter, right? And then going back to 559 tacos. Yeah, for me, the case, like, if you add melted cheese to a taco, like, it's game over. Like, what else am I going to order? Like, why would I order a taco without cheese?
Your whole life, like, when you add in cheese, especially when you add cheese to the base of something, like when you make cheese your foundation, let me tell you, you can't get around it. You can't get off of it. You just stuck to it. Cheese is your base, and it warmed my heart. And then even their red tacos, so they have like they use a salsa that they put on the grill, and then they put your tortilla on top of that, and they fry it up, and they flip it over, fry that side, and then they put the cheese on top, and then everything else. Oh,
it's out of control.
Amazing sight to see. Oh,
yeah, you can get wrecked really easy there. And like for me, like when I go in there and it's like, how many queso tacos before I can't drive home is the question I always ask. And it's so I feel you. Kebab, what did you say, Kebab City?
Yeah.
That place is amazing too. Have you had
delicious.
what blew my mind? And they opened the one in North Fresno, which is, I know they have one in Fowler too, I think. But they do this thing where they put a kebab like on a sword. It's a spear that's in the center of a plate, and they just hang meat from it. And they bring it out to you like it's no big deal. Like, oh, here's your spear with meat.
Well, yeah, here's
this animal.
I mean, what more can you ask for?
Man. Yeah. Oh, that's fine.
What about takeout things for you guys? Where have been your takeout staples during pandemic?
I mean, we've kept Chipotle open we've literally kept them in business. And then Cafe Rio is really good. Their steak salad goes hard, bro. That house dressing, telling you, bro, change your life.
With Jessica and I we've been on Teriyaki Don. Teriyaki Don is something that we just fired. And something like this, the restaurant right around the corner from our house is Robertito's. And Robertito's gets down. Like, the asada fry, you just can't go wrong.
Oh, yeah.
It's
a power burrito.
Let me tell you. I even had a sports burrito once. I was like, the shrimp in there, and I was like, let me go ahead and just try this out. Boy, let me tell you. First of all, there's just way too much food in there. You will get stuffed quick. And right. I'm finishing this. Like, out of pride, I have to finish this whole burrito right now. Delicious.
I mean, when you add fries to anything, it's great. And carne asada fries, like, it's one of the greatest inventions, I think,
ever.
yeah, I mean, it's
That
just taking the
one of our
best things
finest
of all the
moments.
worlds. Taking it, I mean, it's fusion. It's when fusion becomes God, you know, like when food becomes God, it is
Just
carne
put that
asada
together.
fries, right?
There's another one. It's Javier's, and they have the carne asada pizza. And oh, you think you haven't experienced life until you've experienced a carne asada pizza from Javier's. It's fire,
Have
and
you
it's over
guys messed
by
with
Roosevelt.
the Indian pizza trend that's a thing right now? Like the
Man, there's that one on Willow and is it Knees? There's I
don't
haven't
think I've
done
ever
it
heard of
yet,
it.
but I think it's called Curry Pizza. I think that's the name of the
yes,
actual restaurant.
I've never
yes.
heard of
Uh,
it.
yeah, I
I
still haven't
mean,
done
it's
it.
dangerous because it's like all the things you want: bread, like flavorful, like butter chicken pizza. Like, what are we doing? What are we doing? And so it's like, I think
Oh.
for me, it's many cell phone bills, many cell phone bills worth of food is
But
going out the
all
door.
over the city.
But the thing is, right? Like, I mean, small businesses
Yeah,
right now is tough,
It
and
is so hard.
talking about margins and how much you make per pizza or per
Mm-hmm.
carne asada fries is so small.
yeah.
I don't know. Well,
Yeah.
anyway, I appreciate you guys coming on. I just want to start by talking about your guys' podcast because, you know, I want to, you know, this is a small town. Well, it's kind of a small town. It feels like a small town. And there's a couple of our podcasts out there, and your guys' was one of my favorites. So I just want to kind of get
Oh.
the origin story.
Maybe.
Like where the idea come from? What are your guys' backstories? Just kind of promote yourselves a little bit. Talk about where all this came from.
Yeah, it was totally my idea.
Always.
Just gonna throw that out there.
It was though.
It really
I don't
was.
want nobody to get
But
twisted.
so the name Preacher's Hour comes from our like young adult ministry that they've been a part of for a few years now. We did this thing where we like got together at like 4 a.m.
Yeah.
and like all the different preachers, young preachers, got together and we, you know, talked about preaching. We practiced preaching. We critiqued each other's sermons and things like that.
Yeah.
And so we called it Preacher's Hour. And then I've been listening to podcasts for a very long time. I'm like, man, I feel like I could do that. And so me and Brandon always had really good conversations, like all the time. I'm like, people should hear these. I'm not trying to, you know, puff us up. But we be talking about some cool stuff. And I was like, hey, man, we should do a podcast. And he was like, what's a podcast? And I was like, well,
I had zero clue. Like, I had heard about podcasts, but I didn't know like they were a thing. I didn't know that, and I had no clue a lot of people listen to them. I was like, okay, this is like last year, so it's not even.
I was like, come on, man, you turned 30. You gotta listen to podcasts.
And I remember there was one podcast I listened to, but I didn't find enjoyment in listening to people talk. I was like, no, like I was just about music. So if I'm driving in the car, if I'm working out, like I'm just listening to music. And I heard one guy say, he's like, man, if you're like trying to go forward in life, you need to redeem the time that you have. And what he was saying by that is like, you have a lot of free time on your hands when you're driving, when you're working out, and you can choose to listen to the same music over and over again, which the lyrics you already know, or you could like feed your mind and give yourself some education and learn something rather than just wasting time by listening to the music you already know. And after that, I was like, man. And so in that time period, Jeff was already pushing me to listen to podcasts. So I was like, all right, let's check this whole thing out.
Yeah. And then, so the reason we really did it was we have a mentor. We call him Uncle Rod, Pastor Rod Cochran. And he was like, look, you guys need to do this because like when my old generation that taught me, when they died, all their wisdom died with them. And so like you guys need to leave something for the next generation. And your generation's thing is podcast. You guys are going to write a book, but you know, you guys will do a podcast. So like you should get your wisdom, whatever you're wrestling through in your current time, leave it for the next generation. And so we're like, all right, let's try this thing. So we did not know what we were doing.
Zero.
We just went on Amazon, like, what do you need to podcast? And we bought some lapel mics and we recorded our first episode and it was horrible.
On our cell
phones. Like you couldn't even hear Brandon most of the time. The mic it was bad. It was awful, but we've literally made it to over a year now, but we hit a year back in October. And it's just been crazy that like people actually listen to us and like want to know what we think, and people we've never even met from other places like actually interact with our stuff. It's just like
It's insane.
Mind blowing.
Things you never thought would actually happen.
Like the fact that you said you like our podcast, I'm like, this what?
I was
wow, okay, that's amazing.
You listen to it?
I'm sorry we put you through that. You didn't have to, waste
I mean,
your time.
it's just it's a great way to work out ideas, right? Because
it is.
I mean, as someone that's written professionally before, and I mean, when you're working out an idea for an article or something to publish, I mean, there's so much involved, and there's just you don't really have that space. I mean, for a while it was blogging, right? That's how people worked out ideas. I remember like in 08, during the 08 election, like blogs, like I had like 7 blogs I was checking every day. And like, I wanted to be like in these people's minds. Right. And you could kind of get a live stream of their minds, not in the kind of Twitter, I'm going to hurt you way, but in the, like
I'm trying to grow myself.
It's somewhere between Twitter and an article that is somewhat improvisational, but also not just my stream of consciousness at 2 a.m. And so I just think podcasts are a great way to get to know people and also get to know the way people think, right? Because in an article, you have all of these partitions that stand between you and someone's thinking. You have, the editors, you have, how is this going to sound? True. And so I need to structure this around. But what's great about your guys' podcast and a lot of podcasts, right, is that conversation is, one of the best ways that we learn. Yeah. And so how has your podcast grown over time or changed?
Man, I mean, we made a ton of mistakes early on. We still do. We make a little bit less.
Yeah. And we're way more cautious, which I think is also a bad thing. So we don't, in the beginning we took more risk, and now we don't really take risk at all.
Yeah, we try to really think through what we're going to say, and we don't want to like hurt people's feelings, but we still want to, speak the truth as far as we see it. The biggest thing that we did was we hired our little brother. Shout out to Josiah Freeland.
Yeah,
he's our digital media director. As we've given him. We just call yourself whatever you want to call yourself.
right. Whatever you want on your resume.
At first we were just doing audio, and then we bought a USB mic, and then my dad does voiceovers. He's retired from doing criminology, but he started doing voiceovers and said, you need to get some XLR mics. And so he sent me a bunch of stuff to get and equipment that we were able to get. He bought us some equipment for Christmas like a year ago, which was amazing. So that stepped our game up. And then people were like, I don't want to just listen to it. I want to see you guys. So okay, we need to do some video stuff. So our first video stuff was horrible. I was editing it. It was awful. We bought this cheap little camera that was horrible. And then Josiah was like, look, let me help you guys out. And so he started like recording our stuff. We have multiple camera angles now. He does everything on YouTube. He does all the editing. And so he's just made us a lot better.
Yeah. And definitely. So our media has gone through the roof in our eyes, because other people will look at us and be like, no, you guys are still trash.
Yeah.
But our media has
There's always going to be those people on the internet.
Right? Oh,
I mean, when I got my first, because I do a few different podcasts, when I got my first really negative review, it just shattered my ego. Like I was just shattered, because it was on my History of California podcast, my other one, and it was something about someone critiquing the way I told this particular story, and she said something. The reviewer, I'm not just assuming it's a she made herself known, but she said something about like, you should be, he needs to be a bit more careful and a bit more respectful with history. And I was like, oh, like my heart broke and shattered. And so, it's hard to be, kind of impervious to that stuff, but you have to, right?
Yeah.
You have to, because it's there. So what were some of the, I mean, you guys baited me into this. What were some of the things that you've learned to be more cautious about?
I mean, just our opinions.
Right.
And realizing that what we think in the moment, we need to make sure we have as much education about a topic before we try to speak to it.
Yeah.
Sure.
And so talking to older people after the fact, after we posted it, talking to people with a little bit more wisdom, like, yeah, you guys need to, there's some things you don't know about this. And so it's like, oh, okay. And so like just trying to do as much research as possible before we dive into something, and just knowing still, like, even we're going to be limited. Like, it's just our perspective in that moment of time. Once you record and you stop it, it's locked in. You may go back and go, oh, you know what, I should have said this, or I shouldn't have said this, or whatever. But just trying to like be as wise as possible going into an episode. So,
and even keeping our keeping the mindset, like not trying to be as like judgmental or being so concrete that we can't take critique from other people. Being able to hear someone critique our podcast or tell us, hey, do this, do that, or hey, you said this and I don't think this was right. For one, like, we just learned, okay, cool, everyone has their opinion. We try to keep our opinions rooted in the Bible, and that's kind of how we flow. But if someone has like wants to educate us on something and tells us, hey, like, you know, this is the way you say something, or this is the way you approach this conversation, we've learned to have like way more grace than we started off with. Because when we started off, not that we were trying to be arrogant, but we came off. We were really arrogant.
We were just very sure of our opinions. And it's just like, instead of just being like, look, this is our response to something. And like, we're trying to be as humble as possible. Like, please, if we're off, like, please tell us. We don't want to continue being off. Like, please tell us.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's a challenge, right? Because like we talked about before, the great thing about podcasts is that you can kind of work through ideas and like talk about things in ways that are not like totally figured out or whatever. And it's, you know, for me, I just edit it, right? I just after I record it, I just edit it and then take it out because, you know, I mean, there was one time when I was doing something with Paul Swearingen and I said something and I was like, oh my God, what did I just say? And I looked at him and it made like the big eye look where you're like, don't you
really
dare
stepped in it this time.
You know, and it's hard because it feels informal, but it's also, once it's out there and you lose people. And we're all on our own journey. My journey has been, I've realized that I'm going to be kind of the cranky, somewhat progressive person in town, and just kind of accepted that I'm going to lose people. And that's hard. That's hard because, you know, we all want to make everybody happy. It makes sense. If you make people happy, they'll stick around, they'll listen, you know, but at some point I felt like I was lying to people by not being honest, you know, and being like cagey about things that I had strong opinions about. Cause it's like, you know, at the end of the day, you're not going to please everybody. You're going to say some things that piss people off. It just comes with the territory. And it's part of the public arena thing, but I'm sure because, you know, you guys are dealing more directly with religion that, you know, that there's that challenge too, because, you know, it's like the most important part of people's lives.
Oh yeah, exactly. Oh yeah, we have felt the strain that it takes from talking about religion, trying to be gracious to people who think differently than us, people who don't agree with the Bible, and at times it's like, man, how do we address this certain situation without hurting people, without like pushing people away? We were taught through a sermon one time about using the Word of God, which is often called a sword. So the Word of God is referred to as a sword, but not using that sword to cut people's ears off, but using that sword to, like, you know, to separate your flesh or your person from the sin that you commit. So those were two different things. But a lot of Christians, a lot of believers, they will use the Bible to hurt people when that's not what it was intended for. It's not intended for that. It's to bring people into a loving relationship, and that starts with literal conversation and like seeing someone else's point of view before you try to like judge them or condemn them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just, but we need more conversations with people that are on different pages. You know, I mean, we need more civil Thanksgiving table conversations. That's, I feel like people need to hear that because it needs to be modeled for them, because we've forgotten how to be respectful to our racist uncle. You know, it's just, it's hard. It's hard. And I'm not always the best, particularly with people like that. But I'm trying to do the honey, you get stuck in my honey approach, if possible. And I honestly, I respect people that disagree with me. I don't think I have, all the truth or whatever.
Right.
And I just have my perspective. But let's talk a little bit about kind of religion with our generation. We're similar ages. We're dealing with a church that is not growing, I don't think. And the pandemic has really at least been instructive for me in terms of, people's attachment to community. So where do you guys think, for our generation, religious, I feel like religious identification is going down. People are like, I'm just kind of spiritual. I don't really go to church. So what's your guys' take on where we're at?
Yeah, I think that phrase, like I'm not religious, I'm spiritual, is like the go-to thing right now. It's interesting because like both of us work in youth ministry, and so we see a whole up and coming generation that are like really serious about God.
Yeah.
And are asking tough questions, but like they really want to share their faith. They're not ashamed of their faith, which is really cool to see. But at the same time, I think, you get to college and beyond, like our generation, like, yeah, it's very much either on the back burner or like they're just totally like done with it. It's interesting because we just did an episode, it's going to come out next week, about the global, scene where like the West only makes up 11% of Christians are in the West, and so the church in Africa and Asia is actually booming. And so faith may be maybe dying, you could say dying in the West in America, but it's going huge everywhere else. So I think there's something that we can learn from, our brothers and sisters, elsewhere. And I think the pandemic is actually, it's given us challenges, but it's actually presented a huge opportunity for us to reevaluate. Okay, what do we value, and what have we been holding on to that has actually held us back traditionally, or like, the building, or just different things. Like, a lot of churches have been forced to adapt. They haven't been using technology. Now they've had to, and it's actually been good. We've been able to do some things with our church where we've had people connect with us on Zoom from the Congo, from South Africa. And so it's actually been, that wouldn't have happened without this situation. And so I think there's actually a lot of good that we can take from the situation. And the church has, I think, neglected youth always. It's always struggled to deal with young people.
Yeah, no doubt.
It's great with little kids, but once you get to middle school and up, the church doesn't really know what to do with us. And so, we've been forced to like really, okay, how do we reach young people in an era where they're just spiritual? And so I think that's one of the motivations for us as well with our podcast. I think our biggest demographic is between 28 and 34. And so, which is our age range. And so we're trying to help people who have left the church or never been to church understand the church's perspective and where it's gone wrong and where it's gone right. And so trying to help them come back, essentially.
Because one thing we notice is like many people want to take religion and just kind of throw it out because of everything that goes on, or everything that's like connected to like religious stuff. But what we want to say is, like we want you to research and to look into this. Like we want you to consider this, not on a like we just want you to join our church thing. This is what we believe a lot of the churches have done pre-COVID, is we just want people to come into our building. And that's not religion. And just doing a bunch of rules and regulations is also not what we've been called to. What we've been called to is an actual relationship. And it's in a relationship, there's nuance. In a relationship, there's questions. In a relationship, there's doubt. And then there's reassurance from both sides. So if you're talking about students, and they're not really understanding the Bible or not understanding like what their church is doing, most of the time because they don't understand what they're reading in the Bible. And what we fail to do is to teach the Bible. What we do is we just teach tradition, and we teach people to come to this church, and we teach people to pay a tithe and to do the, like, it's so much stuff that we teach that that if you miss the reason why you do it, it just becomes repetition. It just becomes what's the word when you just like doing something over again? Habitual ritual. Yeah. It's not. It doesn't matter to the relationship. It's almost if you're married to your wife and you do the same thing every day. She's eventually like, "Why do you do this?" Was this, I thought was wives want. I thought that's what you do at wives. You say good morning, cook some breakfast, you go to work, you come back, you high five, and you go to bed.
We hang out for an hour and a half on Sunday, and that's it. And it's like,
I mean, don't you hate it though? I mean, when you've been doing something for your partner for a long time, and then you discover that they hate it. I have that happen to me all the time, because we can be pretty nonverbal sometimes when we're in our rituals at home. It's like handing the thing off or whatever, and then you discover, oh, I actually don't even like that. And you're like,
this whole time,
why the hell did you not say something to me? I've been standing right here.
Yeah.
And it's a challenge. I think for me, when people say stuff like religion and spirituality, I just want them to understand that those things are connected in such a deep way that to extract them from each other is almost impossible, because I mean, the practices that, you would, like, let's take meditation, for example, because that's a popular one for people that are kind of, outside of the organized community. They'll download Headspace or Calm.com app or whatever. How do you think that stuff got to you? Where do you think it came from? It didn't just emerge, it came from a tradition that's been modified over time, and it eventually got to you. And so the religion creates a lot of the practices that are spiritual. And so I think a lot of ways when people say stuff about religion, spirituality, what they're saying is they don't want to be committed to other people, I think is part of it. And it's because other people are mean.
Yeah, we've said that so many times.
Other people are just mean, right? They're just mean,
Yeah.
and they do mean things, and they judge you, and you get mad. And, for anyone that thinks they don't have I mean, it's one thing if you don't believe any of it or whatever. I mean, that's fine. I mean, maybe not fine. I don't know. I mean, that's fine. I don't, I'm not, you believe what you want to believe. But if you do believe things like, the communities can be very helpful. And there's communities for everybody. There's communities for wacko liberal type people like me. There's communities for conservative people. There's communities for everybody. And I think community it helps you ultimately. But
as long as
there's challenges, right? There's challenges.
As long as your community is not storming the Capitol.
Yes.
And
we'll talk about storming the Capitol in a second. So I think one of the things is, and one of the reasons why, okay, let's just talk about it. One of the reasons why the church might need to die is because it's become so intertwined with politics, right? And the kind of the decadence of that, its decay is so visible, because when something becomes so intertwined that you don't know whether that comes from your religion or from your politics, and you can't distinguish between them. I mean, obviously they inform each other. We're in Fresno. There's a huge Mennonite community here that's about nonviolence, and they see that directly related to their understanding of the Gospels, right? Yeah. And those things are connected. But when your political party is telling you to do certain things, and they're saying, oh, by the way, God told you to do this, that's when things obviously get a little weird. So do you, I mean, I personally kind of think religion does need to, parts of it need to die in order to have a new life. Do you guys agree, disagree?
Yeah. I mean, we've done episodes on this on there's, as from a Christian standpoint, I don't see how you can marry yourself to a political party, to either one. And I think that is the good thing about, Trump not getting reelected, was I think so many people, like you said, they got so stuck on like, this is our party, this is God's party. No, bro, not at all. Like, and so that whole, like, if our party doesn't win, that means God has somehow lost. Like that definitely needed to die. I think just focusing on, one issue and thinking like that's got to determine every single thing that I vote for, regardless of what that party does, whoever's leading that party, no matter what they say, doesn't matter. no, I think character has to matter.
Oh, definitely.
And
100%.
And there's gotta be nuance. Like we've
Mhm.
lost nuance like so bad because we're just blindly following, people want to follow somebody.
Mhm.
That's the problem. And so,
I think
I think needs to be separation for sure.
yeah, because what we need to separate is we need to separate relationships from like human relationships from like political relationships.
Mhm.
What we've missed as a church, what we missed as a denomination or as a religion, is we stopped caring for people and we started caring for things that don't really matter. So when you start caring for your building more than you care about a person, it's easy to say, hey, we can't really give you the diapers that you need for your family because we got to pay this $42,000 electric bill. And it's like, yo, like
there's mortgage for this.
This
building.
mortgage for the building is get paid. So like, we can't help you. That was never Jesus's intent. He was never like, we got to do this thing and we got to save money for this. No, he was like, we got to give and give and give so that people who are less fortunate can have what they need. So if you have more, then you should give more.
Yeah, we've got to place value on people instead of anything else.
Anything
Your
else.
Party, facilities, popularity, anything. Like people need to be valued above everything else. And so I think there's definitely needs to be a separating of specifically Christianity from a particular party, either party.
Yeah.
We shouldn't fit when you
one
read
in particular, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, let's be real. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that's just a fact. Unfortunately, that's the funny thing is, if you look back at history, recent history, you're talking about 1980s with the Ronald Reagan election. Before that, Christians were totally not married to either one. And there was a deliberate campaign by Reagan's campaign manager to specifically get Christians to align with the Republican Party. People don't even know history, even recent history, to realize they've been manipulated. And so just kind of, I think all of this that's happened, as horrible as it was, I think it was necessary to wake people up, to like really question, like, okay, what are we doing? Who are we worshiping? Are we worshiping God? Or are we worshiping a party or anything like that, a candidate, anything like that?
Or even like looking to them as like the end all be all. You know what I'm saying? Like I wasn't a huge fan of Trump, and he did some good things. He did some really, really bad things. But at the end of the day, I didn't look to him to save America. Yeah. I'm not looking to Joe Biden to save America. But when you have the mindset that this man, this person who is flawed just like the rest of us, is going to somehow lead us into this new like understanding and this new like love relationship with other human beings, that's not where it comes from. Like everything that we need is going to come from God. It's going to come from Jesus, who's going to be like who's going to give us light, who's going to give us like the ability to love our neighbor even when they hurt us. There's
or disagree with them.
Yeah, or disagree with it. Like the fact that we are so polarized as a nation and we can't be friends because we don't agree doesn't make any sense. I'm sure that there was a ton of people who followed Jesus. There was some people in the Bible who followed God who didn't always agree with what was going on, but they still remain family. They still remain friends. So this is what the world needs right now. How do we become family? How do we stay family and disagree on a certain topic? How do we live our lives but not always agree? And I'm saying obviously we can't disagree on everything because now we can't be friends.
It's okay to murder. Like,
no, it's not cool. Like if you disagree on this, help me understand why you believe this, and then I'll help you understand why I believe this. And let's see if we can find some commonality, some common ground to stand on so that we can continue in a love relationship.
Right. I've got a fun question for you guys. We were just talking about, risky topics. Do you think there's too many churches in Fresno?
That's a good question.
There's a lot of churches here.
There's over 500 churches in a city of 600,000 people.
It's insane.
I mean,
I don't know if I'll answer that as far as like yes or no. I think that's something that God would decide. I'm not going to tell people what you're doing is wrong. Like, do your thing. I think it offers a lot of options for people that to have their needs met, whatever they're looking for. There's a lot to choose from.
Right. So and what I'm getting at with the question is kind of like, church has become a business, right? In a lot of ways. And you just, you market to people, right? And you've all these communities kind of competing for this group of people, this captive group of people that they know are wanting this one thing, and it just makes it, I don't know, there's something kind of distasteful about it, you know what I mean?
Yeah, we've talked about that before, especially the whole business side of things. And so I believe we've talked about this before. I think the model of church that we have is dying and should die. And I think the model that will replace it will be more people centered instead of resource centered and power centered and money centered, and not focused on manipulating people, but actually caring for people. And so there's always going to be, big giant mega churches, which there's nothing wrong with that. But I think eventually you will see, at least for Fresno specifically, the churches that aren't right, that aren't don't have the right motivations, they'll get taken care of. I think they will die out, and the ones that really care about people will continue.
Because at the end of the day, though there's a ton of churches to choose from, that doesn't mean every church in Fresno is like on the right track. So I think one thing that we need to understand is, if a church you go to is not like meeting your needs or like loving you the way that Jesus would love you, then you have to like consider, okay, this is not the only church in Fresno. So I think that having a lot of churches does give the good option to say, okay, now I know the difference between like a church that's going to love me and care for me and a church that just wants like my money. And you could like sometimes it's blatant, like you can clearly see that there's churches out here who don't really care about people, and then there's other churches that really do care about people, and there's churches that were caring about more of their resources and their stuff, and now they're just now coming to the terms of like, yo, we've been thinking about the wrong thing. So we give a lot of grace to churches, even ourselves, because like we just started a church, and in our church we don't have all the answers, but we're trying to figure it out as we go. So as we're planning and we're like creating these like resources, and we're creating like where we're going to plant all that kind of stuff, while we're doing this, we're thinking about how do we influence our community.
How do we avoid making this mistakes that a lot of churches have unfortunately made, learning from their things they did right, learning things they did wrong. And not just trying to make another church, but trying to make something different that gets back to like the spirit of why the church exists in the first place.
I mean, I'm just going to say a bad word. There's so much shit to do. Like worrying about how many people are sitting in your bleachers or your pews or whatever the hell you use shouldn't matter, right? I mean, if you, and this is what I was at my church. So I've mentioned before that I attend a church, even though I'm somewhat on the fence about participating these days. I'm just cranky and old and, whatever. And I, but I love them, and I'm glad to be there. They were, I lost my train of thought. They were asking me about like thinking about the church's new mission and like some kind of like, leaflet interview or whatever they were doing. And I honestly think that it's worrying less about what will get people there and like worrying a lot more about what you're doing in your community that will bring people. Because I think people want to be united around a goal. They don't want to be sold stuff, And I feel like a lot of churches want to sell people on stuff like, oh, it's really cool to be here with us, and it's like, I don't care. Like I will go to a bar to meet cool people before I come to your youth service on Saturday night, it's just what it is. And so I think it's just the wrong sales tactic. And thinking about it like a business.
We've allowed consumerism to come into the church.
Facts.
And so it was never meant to be something that you have to sell. Like if you just live the way that Jesus calls us to live, it's going to attract people. And then the goal is not just to keep you all in here gathered and we're just here in this building. We just want to get 1 billion of us in here. It's to go out and like help people, meet people's needs, like help the world through its struggles. Like we shouldn't just stay here. We should come here, learn, grow, fellowship, love each other, and then go out and like help the world. You know what I'm saying? It shouldn't be about just how many people can we get here,
Right.
how many people can we help, how many lives can we affect.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a good way. I mean, it really focuses what you do if you make it about other people and not just getting butts and seats. You know, and I think people will feel respected that way, as opposed to like a Bible salesman. Like, hey, I mean, okay, I will say this: when I was in college, I went to a church exclusively for the donuts, and you know, it was fine. I also got things out of it too, but it was it was a, you know, fancy church in San Francisco, and they're wonderful people. But I just went in there, I plowed through like 3 or 4 donuts, and drank a cup of coffee, listened a little bit to the sermon, and said, okay, I'll get back on the bus and go home. You know, I mean, what I'm saying is people can show up that way, but I think people stay when you are doing things and you're contributing.
Absolutely.
Because there's been times where you can literally go into a church and, you know, feel welcomed and like, man, I want to come back. And there's other times you go to a church, I don't care how good the sermon is, how good the music is. If you didn't feel welcomed in that moment, you're not coming back. I don't care how fire anything else was. You're just going to be like, man, that was dope, but these people don't really care about me. I don't feel cared for. And that first impression you can't get back.
Yeah. I mean, we're just primates, you know, like we just want to be acknowledged by the other primate, right? And like we like want to look each other in the eye and feel like they're looking back at us. And like there's been so many times where it's been so cool inside a building and I'm like, oh wow, this is so nice. And then no one said hi to me and I was like, okay, I hate you, and I just leave, right? Like, you know, you could have an amazing music and like an inspiring message or whatever, but if like I don't feel welcomed in any capacity, I'm like,
what's it all
okay, great, I'll go on YouTube and find a better message or a better band or whatever. And now today,
lonely.
Right now today, because church is online, you can just go look up someone better, right? Because you can always find a better speaker, you can always find better music.
Always.
So what is it really? So let's finish by talking about books. I finish every show this way. You know, there's books behind me. Books are a big part of my life. What are some books you guys have read recently that have been, or just in general that you've read that were impactful for you?
Man, so I really suck at finishing books. I'm amazing at starting them.
Oh, it's so good to start, right?
Yeah. And so there's one that I just got not too long ago, called How Africa Shaped the Christian Mind. It's like the history of Christianity in Africa and how it actually influenced Europe, not the other way around. Really great book. And then Letters to the Church by Francis Chan is one of my favorite books. And the last one for me would be Reason for God by
Timothy
Keller.
Yeah, oh my gosh,
that's a great book.
I didn't finish it, but I got to like chapter 4. And I was like,
man, you gotta keep going. I'm telling you.
Well,
I did finish
it.
that one. I did finish that.
That's a great book to read for anyone like searching. You don't have to be a Christian, you don't have to be a believer to understand. I mean, you do gotta be smart or at least have a dictionary by you, but for the most part, it's a really good read, and it just kind of helps you understand why God. Answer the question like why God. So that's a really good one. Oh, and the Bible. The Bible's a good one.
That book. You know, I actually encourage non-religious people, because I know there's people like that listen to my podcast, because I interview lots of non-religious people, and most of my episodes are not about religion in any capacity. It's about, you know, interesting people doing interesting things. But I encourage all people to read the Bible, in part because you can't understand a lot of things about our culture. And if you read any like important work of fiction, like a novel or something, chances are there's going to be like biblical references. Like the Bible is by far the most important book in terms of understanding the Western mind and like all of our ideas, because they all just get traced back to the Bible. So if you don't know the Bible, in my mind, you're somewhat illiterate in the modern world. And but you know, encouraging someone to read that book is a little tough. It's a little tough sledding.
Yeah, but it's
definitely a history teacher.
Oh yeah, I can definitely tell. He talks just like
he definitely teaches U.S. history too. I love it.
You know, I mean, teaching history, it's funny these days. I don't know. I mean, I've had fun I don't know about you, but all the stuff that's been going on with Mr. Trumpy has been really fun for
great.
history class.
This is a great year to teach history, man.
I mean,
all of that's been
Constitution is
wonderful.
interesting for the first time ever.
Facts, absolutely.
Which is crazy because I remember like during right after the Black Lives Matter protest, Hillmar, the history book makers, McGraw-Hill, like they were being sued for like quote unquote lying in their history books, and I was like, what lies? And when I went back and looked,
you could ask me. I would have told you.
I did ask you eventually. I was like, Jeff, like, what? Why were they being sued for lying in the history book? I'm like, what did they lie about? He's like,
history.
And this is crazy. So I think like being a history teacher now is probably more important.
We're never gonna have a year this good in a while. Like you usually get every 4 years you get. Oh, hey guys, listen, this is wonderful, isn't it? And then after every other year, they're just like, Constitution, who cares? I'll never use this. It's like, no, I promise. It's really important. But this year, it's been wonderful. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, the history world is interesting, especially the textbooks. I mean, I don't know. I'll tell you guys a story to close. So,
those stories.
So there's one year where I was teaching at a private Christian school in Southern California. And it was a pretty conservative school. And they got their textbooks from this university called Oral Roberts, which if you know anything about Oral Roberts, they've had a rough history in this particular area. And so they gave me the textbook to look at, to like review, to determine whether I thought it was a good textbook. And my metric for these textbooks is always go to the Civil War, and then how they cover that will determine what I think. So I just kind of skipped forward. And I found, in textbooks, they have those kind of like standalone sections where there's like, a novel that was written, or whatever. And it was a section about God's Spirit. And I was like, oh, interesting, because, if you teach in public school like we do, you don't see stuff like that in textbooks. So you're always like, oh, I wonder what they're going to say. And so it was like, so the picture was Confederate soldiers and they were all bowing to something. And I was like, oh, what's going on here? And I start to read, and it said, yes, even though the Union won the Civil War, God's Spirit actually moved more in the South, which is evidenced by the number of revivals that happened during the Civil War. And I just like did one of those like fall back in your chair moments. That's a real textbook. What? That's a real textbook.
No way.
Serious.
No way.
Serious. Yeah. I mean, it's no joke. And there's this sneaky, we're blessed to be in California, and you gotta, even if you're a little bit conservative, you gotta think, oh God, these liberals that are so concerned about offending people, thank God we have them, because then you have what's happening in Utah, where they said you can opt out of Black History Month curriculum. They passed a law where you can opt out. Like your eighth grader opts out. Yeah, I don't need to know this. Emmett Till? No thanks.
First of all, how do you even do that? Like, Black history is American history.
That's what we're saying. But the best thing I saw was someone on Twitter said, "Can I opt out of White History Month, please?"
The whole year.
It's the whole year, right? It's not even a month. It's crazy times to teach.
Wow, that is intense.
I'm immediately grateful for the textbook I have, and I don't like it, but it's much
better than that. Oh man, that is wild.
That's insane.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure we could talk about this stuff forever. We're at an hour and 15, so we should probably call it. Thanks for talking to me.
No problem.
This has been fun, and I feel like I'm in a better place with at least a lot of the things that I came in kind of feeling irked about, in regards to the stuff with the well. So thanks for, kind of being pastoral to me and helping me figure out, what's the best thing to do for people ultimately, right? Which is, there's good things to do for the ego, there's good things to do for lots of stuff, but what's best for people?
Yeah,
man. Thank you so much for having us.
Man, this was great.
We were juiced when you reached out. Like, oh, dude, look,
it was
man,
like somebody wants to talk to us.
Somebody actually wants to talk to us. This is crazy.
Well, yeah, you guys are doing good things, and so I would just say, what I've learned over doing this stuff is patience and persistence, right? And definitely don't look at how many people listen per episode. That's another thing.
We fell into that.
Yeah, we
at
did
the
that.
beginning.
Oh man,
we
It's
did
it's
that.
you,
No,
see,
we
but
can't.
that's, I mean, you can make an important episode and and 5 people listen to it and that changes their life or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's much more important than 1,000 people
So
listening
true.
to it and like they're like, yeah, okay, that was funny.
Let's go.
I
I like you, Jordan.
Thank you for that, Jordan.
Because
like
I can
you,
say
Jordan.
I can get on here and say some dumb shit and make people laugh, and they're like, "Oh, this is great. I want to listen to him." Like he just says fart jokes and like makes like innuendos. Like it's like who cares? Who cares?
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Ultimately, is that people that make good art, they're just in their art, right? They're in their art. If you don't like it, screw you. I mean, not
You don't have
guys
to
say
listen.
that, but like for
You don't
me,
have
Just
to
keep
listen.
scrolling,
Just keep
man.
scrolling.
Just keep
like,
yeah, just
scrolling.
keep scrolling. Who cares? Don't
Yeah,
listen to
man.
this.
yeah.
Absolutely.
That's why I don't understand the dislike.
I don't get the dislike button.
The dislike button.
You
like,
didn't have to
just keep going. Like if you don't like it,
Exactly.
keep
Yeah.
pushing.
Definitely don't read the reviews. Those are the worst. I mean, they're not quite YouTube comments, but they're close. I mean, but you guys put your stuff on YouTube, don't you?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
You guys are
we've
brave.
gotten a little bit.
We got a little
But,
bit of heat on YouTube.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, well, YouTube is like, it's the Wild West, man. There's no rules.
It's worse than
People just
Twitter.
let's say whatever they want.
Yeah, man.
Anyway. All right.
Thank you, man. Appreciate you, bro.
All right.